Okay, very good. Well, thanks very much, Pat, for setting this up. And this is one of those miracles that my generation is just always seeing a miracle. And I'm glad to be here. And let me just jump right into what I want to talk about. I'm going to take you to the night of the 12th of the 13th of August of 1950. And we're with Special Operations Group aboard the U.S. Horace A. Bass, which is an auxiliary personnel destroyer. And we're about at the point where you see on that, up at there, you may see up in the upper right-hand corner, USS Bass. You'll see Bass right there in the middle.
Yep.
Yes.
And that night we tried to go ashore. We had the Bass because it had a low deck aft and was easy to launch. Excuse me, was easy to launch small boats, rubber boats from it.
Dad, could you start and tell us how you ended up on the Bass in the first place?
Well, we were. I was going to get to that. I'll get to
Okay.
that in just a second.
All right.
Just
Okay.
tell me one of the exciting things happening. And the Bass,
Uh-huh.
we had 2 second lieutenants and 30 Marines, and the underwater demolition team had 2 or 3 officers and maybe 30 sailors. So they weren't very big. And we launched boats. They had a very quiet motorboat, which pulled us, and we launched the boats and it pulled us in it. But that first night, we were trying to go ashore, but we couldn't because we put swimmers in the water and near the beach, but they could not get ashore and back. In World War II, they had put swimmers ashore, but in this case, they could not. Couldn't do it in one night. So we returned to the Bass and told the Commodore the situation. And I'd like to think I volunteered for something, but I probably didn't. I probably just said, okay. When he said, could the Marines go straight in? I probably said, yes, sir. So the next night we did, up in the very north where you see the night SOG 13. That was, we went ashore there. And we went out, we had their boats pulled us. A pulling boat, a motorboat, pulled the rubber boats in toward the beach, and we had we had the Marines in 4 um, rubber boats, and the Navy UDT carrying their demolitions in 2 big rubber boats, and the first one in. And so I would just tell you that the exciting part was that I had never done this before, and we had very little understanding of it. And so the emotional part was as we're heading into that beach where it says SOG 13, August. Heading into that beach, we had no idea what was going to happen as we got in the surf. And our rowers were pretty good in the surf, but it wasn't very heavy surf, but there was some. And we got ashore and set up a little perimeter when we got ashore. And then inside the perimeter, we set up range lights, which is a green light toward the water and a red light toward the land. And when you look at it, you steer whichever side the green light is to the red light, you steer toward the green light. Anyway, we brought everybody ashore and got ashore in good shape. We set up a perimeter at the beach, and as soon as that was set up, I led a team up
Grandpa, you've gotten muted.
Okay, am I up back again?
Yeah. Last thing we heard was you set up a team.
Right. We set up a little perimeter around where our boats were, and then we started climbing these huge rocks, each rock had been put there as an escarpment for the railroad, and it worked very beautiful for that, but was very hard to climb. I don't know how the underwater demolition team was able to carry the stuff up. And when we got to the top, we got to the end of the tunnel, and there was a small campfire and a wooden rifle with a crude bayonet on the end of it. Not any kind of a weapon to speak of, but it also said there'd been a sentry, and where there are sentries, there are corporals of the guard, and there are sergeants of the guard. So we were very alert from that time on. We got our perimeter around the Marines made a perimeter around the tunnel edge, tunnel entrance. UDT went to work positioning C3 explosives, and we decided that we really ought to check out the tunnel because there was somebody somewhere around nearby. And we did. And I decided to go down the tunnel, and I said, would anybody join me in the tunnel? And this youngster stood up and says, I'll go with you, sir. Bobby Jean Lewis and he and I were inseparable from that time on. And we went down the tunnel, and I would tell you very shortly in a tunnel at night with no moon, and there is no light at the end of that tunnel. And being no light at the end of the tunnel, it very shortly got 100% dark. Now, if you haven't had 100% darkness, you really, once you experience it, you'll know that it's a very different sensation. We were very, very careful then, and each step got harder to take. I kept my left hand on the rock on the left side of the tunnel. Bobby Jean Lewis kept his on the right. And when I totally ran out of courage, I mean, totally ran out of courage, could not take another step. I said, Bobby Jean, I think we've come too far. Probably I said, Lewis, we've come too far. And he said, yes, sir, right away. And we turned around, and in order to turn around, I said, I'm going to turn very slowly to my left until my right hand is on the tunnel. And I did, and they said, you turn to your right and be sure your left hand is on the tunnel. And when you're sure, we'll start out. And we did. And we walked back out the tunnel without incident. But it taught me that there is a limit to courage. And there comes points when you simply can't move your feet. Anyway, we got back out. Everything worked okay. UDT got their stuff in place. And as we turned to leave, this Lieutenant Wilson of the UDT said, Phil, we better carry the rings on our finger, the ring that holds the pin, and they were timers, actual timers. And he said, we better take those pins back to prove that we weren't too scared to pull them when we left. And he and I were the last ones down, and the last ones, and we got ourselves off the beach. Not a big story. It took a while to get off the beach, and we did, and got back to the ship. And 30 minutes later, right on schedule, everybody back at the ship. 30 minutes later, the explosion went off, and that was the first tunnel. To back up just a little, and let me catch up and point out that the war started on the 25th of June of 1950. Everybody was totally unprepared. They pulled Marines from everywhere to form the 1st Marine Brigade, and it sailed about July 16th, 2 weeks. I'd been in embarkation school, came back and didn't have a place in the 5th Marines at that time. Very disappointed. Went to headquarters battalion and was sent to the recon company and as a help for administration. Zero training in anything, rubber boats, recon, jumping out of airplanes, anything like that. And within a week, they requested the recon send remainder, recon earliest. It had 2 officers, myself and 1 other second lieutenant, and 30 troops was all we could find. And we flew to Japan and joined the Special Operations Group aboard the Bass in Yokosuka, Japan. Switch now, and we're back on the second night, which is August 14th and 15th. Same operational sequence. Objective was 2 tunnel entrance, about 200 yards apart with a culvert between. When we got there, we found there were 3 hobos sleeping under the culvert. We took them a half a mile away, tied them up good, gagged, separated them, and guarded them, and then left them when we left. They had the explosion was going to go in 30 seconds, and they were well out of the way, and so they weren't in any danger. It would take them a couple hours to untie themselves. Came back
Grandpa,
again, same story. Wilson said, "Shutler, be sure we carried the trigger pins," and we did. And 30 minutes later, back aboard ship, explosion. The third night was a target, a railroad bridge and highway bridge on level ground about a mile inland. Quite a big trek for carrying that kind of stuff. While we were there was a train moving south. Now, I left out before that we had two things that we would not do. One, we did not carry grenades. We were not permitted to carry grenades. And the second thing, we did not put a round in the chamber. And this was, as we saw this was the saving grace, because you have all that red hot sporting blood, and now you see this train moving south. And if I had just had a grenade, I could have dropped it in the engine and blown up that engine on top of that thing. And when we let the train go by, and we saw that it was a troop train with about 3 cars of troops, and we would have had one big mess and never made it back to town. Anyway, we did the same mission, trigger pins pulled, came back 30 minutes later, boom. So the railroad got cut in 3 places, first, second, and third. But you'll notice that those nights are successive nights. So we're up all night. I don't know what we did in the daytime. We must have been sleeping. The other thing was that the place where we slept on the bass was up in the forward part of the ship, and it was one tiny room for all the UDT officers and all the Marines, two Marines, and it was known as the Boar's Nest because when we were ashore, we were scrambling through rice paddies, and we had no way to wash clothes. Rice paddies, I see it says paddies, and we had no way to wash clothes. Anyway, it was not a tidy place to live at all. We did our best, but it was pretty dirty. So if we consider that those deployments were 4 nights in a row, and so we were pretty tired. But by then they had questions about whether we should go to Incheon or not. We got the next picture, Pat. Whether we should go to Incheon or not, and
Grandpa, when you deployed with the regiment, was Recon Company like part of the regiment, or was it like a brigade unit and they would parse out recon teams to the different regiments?
Well, this was all that we had in the division at the time was one company. We had really gone down in personnel after World War II. This was all that was in the entire division was one company.
And for everybody on the call, Grandpa,
Recon
do you want to
company.
like tell them how big a division is and how big a company is so they get
Well,
a
the
sense of
division is about 20,000. The company is maybe 200, and it's commanded by a captain. And division is commanded by a 2-star major general. The division is a big, powerful organization, but they'd really gone to nothing in our personnel. When we and so we were as minimum a size force as you can possibly imagine, and just terribly small. We had the next nights were recon, and the recon is very different. The recon the water, UDT recons the water. They use a lineup. They hold a cord, a knotted cord line ashore, and they work all in the dark, and they just work against what they can feel in their hands and what they can see with lighted compass, and they take the time and the depths. And so you have a beach they had four teams in the water taking the beach recon. The guys, they had a team ashore to control them, and we had Marines guarding each of those beaches, each of those teams. And then they wanted a recon inland, and Dana Cashin went to the right, and I went to the left, and we went about a mile down the coast, a mile inland, a mile back to the center, a mile back, and a mile back out till we came back out to the center. Now, the first 2 nights that we did it, we show a beach recon on the 20th and 21st, and then again on the 23rd and 24th, and it worked just like we had it asked it to.
Can I interrupt, Dad?
But
I'm going to interrupt Dad just a second because he had started to tell you what was happening here in the big picture at that point was that after all those operations on the East Coast, MacArthur was considering whether or not to do a landing on the west coast of Korea. His preferred place was Incheon, but not many other people liked Incheon, so they were looking for alternative beaches that they could go across. And so they sent the recon company back over to the west side of Korea to recon these beaches and see if they would work as an alternative. So that's what these reconnaissance missions were about.
yeah, thanks, Bob. I didn't do very good on that transition. As you got ashore, it didn't take us long. They were lousy places to even think about landing. Shallow beaches, like big tides as they were at Incheon, some 20 some feet of tides. And there was no exits at all. So we said we had about a two sentence report: lousy on the beach, lousy inland, and they didn't. Of course, they didn't try it. Anyway, so we got, we'll see that we went on the 23rd and 24th north, and then 24th and 25th in the deployment the same. Water teams, you can see that down toward the south, I think. Mine is covered up by the words, but it is there. And we said we did these four water teams in position and protected, and we were just about to turn inland, mile down the beach, about to turn inland when we started to take fire down the beach from our right flank. So we had these bullets going overhead. Now, up to this time, we'd had things all our own way, and we weren't at all overconfident. But on the other hand, we weren't ready for the next event, which was these bullets went overhead. You hear a mock shock of the bullet. The crack of the bullet is overhead, long gone. You're not going to get hit by that bullet. But once you hear it, all of that red hot sporting blood turns to frozen tea very fast. Anyway, so that happened, and we worked my side was on the left. We had about a mile to work people back to the beach, and we did. And we had two big boats were supposed to take us off, but when we got back there was only one boat. We'd had a man wounded, and the other boat had been taking him back to the ship, probably saved his life. But I want to tell you, when there's only one boat and you expect two, and you have more people than the boat will handle, you have a kind of confusion that is very, very, very high. We finally said, best thing is to get off the beach and find out what's really happened. And we did. And that's the only time I really fired a shot in any kind of anger. I fired a complete clip out of my carbine, just to make a diverting fire while everybody else ran down the beach and pulled the boat into the water. And then I ran as fast as I could and joined them in the boat. We got back aboard ship and found that there were about 10 people missing. UDT, 4 or 5 Marines, 5 or 6. And we had a complete muster. And there was never a moment in my life that was darker than that moment, because I knew that I was responsible for getting everybody back from those missions. But we rigged their silent boat and put a rubber boat beside it, and I got in the rubber boat, and here's where my high school experience came to the fore. I put my eye right down on the water, and my dad and I used to in the streams near Northfield. And when we did, we would go completely into darkness. We came so that I had a complete sense of night vision, the total night vision, that you know that you can just keep right on going even though you don't have any light. And I realized that I could see heads bobbing in the water, and we did see that, and we started picking people up one by one, and we had picked every person that was in our organization, none of them in any serious condition at all. We had we had some poor swimmers, and we had teamed them with good swimmers, and they, in order to stay afloat, they discarded their metal part of their rifle and took the wooden part and tied it into the legs of their pants and used them as water wings. So the good swimmers were pulling the bad swimmers, poor swimmers, out into the stream, and we worked that boat, that silent boat. I don't know how long. It must have been hours, but we finally got every last Marine and sailor and brought them back aboard ship. And I will tell you, as down as I had been when we realized we didn't have everyone back aboard, I was just that high when we finally had a muster and every single person answered the muster. We did have one man wounded, and we took care of him and shipped him off the next day to a better facility. But it was overall it was a very exciting month of August of 1950. I figure that my career peaked at second lieutenant in that month. It was a, it was a it was quite an experience overall. No, this was the major part of what we had for Pat's group, and I can briefly tell you the rest of my career in Korea if you'd like.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
please. Yes,
The
please.
we went back, our company, which had been independent, 30 Marines, completely independent of anybody in Marine Corps, went back to be part of the recon company. And we made Incheon landings in September and made the landing at D+1. We did not make the combat landing, but we got up to there was an airfield, and that was the main objective of the first part of the Incheon Seoul campaign. Got to the airfield, and there was when you wanted to cross the Han River, which was maybe 2 or 3 miles to the north, and the recon did cross the Han River, and looked like they had just had a swimming team, but they said send the rest of them, and we were traveling across. Our platoon was traveling in LVTs. We had 2 LVTs for each platoon, 6 LVTs, moving us across the river. But they started to have heavy fire from the objective. And when that happened, the LVT commanders got disoriented. And I was sitting in the back and I had no idea, what they were doing. I had no direct communication to the LVT drivers. And so I was looking out as we looked out the LVT, we could see the sky. And I looked at one time and the sky had changed the direction. And it was very disorienting we could see I knew where the North Star had been, but it was now in the other direction. And so I got the LVT to stop driving, got quiet, and realized that he'd gone upriver. And I had a voice tell me, get out of the LVT. And I wouldn't believe it, but it came twice and said, get out of the LVT. I did. We had a little sound-powered phone on the back of the LVT. And when I jumped over the side, I realized that I had not gone in over my head. I'd been up to my waist maybe in the mud, but it wasn't sticky mud. And so we were able to walk beside the LVTs and get them back out of the water. which was a very exciting night again.
Can I interject again, Dad?
Yeah.
I'll jump in again here. This this operation, the reason it got so exciting was um, they were doing the reconnaissance ahead of the brigade, like Dad said, crossing the Han River from the west side to the east on their way to Seoul, and they thought that there was no resistance on the opposite side of the river. So the reconnaissance company commander, whose name was Captain Houghton, swam across with swimmers, just a few very lightly armed guys. And when they got over there, they discovered that there was a battalion of uh, North Koreans on the hills
You
on
want
the
to,
opposite side of the river who started shooting at them, and the company commander was wounded, and there was all kinds of confusion, and they were trying to get the swimmers off the beach. And then Dad's group, as he was just saying, was in the vehicles, and they were getting all disoriented too. And so Dad, since the company commander was out of action, Dad got them all out of there basically.
Yeah, it was.
Bub,
I wish
Bub or
it
Grandpa, do you want to tell people how big a battalion is versus how big your unit was in this situation?
Yeah, let's take those words. I'm sorry. A Marine company is on the order of 200 um, Marines. A battalion is on the order of 600 or 700, depending on what its mission is. 600 or 700 with a lieutenant colonel commanding. A regiment of Marines has 3 battalions, and it's commanded by a colonel. And it has roughly, 3 battalions would be something in the order of 1,200 to 1,500 people. A, a, uh, a division, on the other hand, has 3 regiments, but that's only the smaller part of it because it's got all the logistic forces that go with it. So a division has something in the order of 20,000 people overall, and is a very, very powerful force. In those years, we were so low that we had nothing like those. And the brigade that went to South Korea, which was loaded out in the middle of July and was in action on the 2nd of August, was very under strength. But it had one thing going for it that no brigade had ever had before, and that was it had the 2 fighter squadrons with 24 airplanes each, and a night fighter squadron with 12 airplanes. So they had 60 Corsairs that were in the right in the brigade itself. Yeah, that's you got pictures for us. If you can expand those are great. We got into the. I'll just briefly discuss the on the way up to the reservoir. On the way up to the reservoir, we had a little battle in the 4th of November of 1950 at a little hamlet called Chinhong-ni, and there were 4 tanks that had been camouflaged, and we ran across one of them as the lead company, and one of our sergeants, Sergeant Tui, God love him, he opened the hatch and threw in a grenade, and when he did, the engine started. When the engine started, the 2nd and 3rd and 4th tanks also started. So we had, at that moment, we had 4 tanks around us. The 2nd tank was killed by a recoilless rifle. The 3rd tank, we had a 3.5-inch rocket launcher. As I was exiting that place as quick as I could, I saw the rocket launcher lying beside the road, rocket launchers lying beside the road, and just said to them, "Follow me." And we went back up to this little ridge line that we'd been on, and they one shot the 3rd tank, and then the 4th tank was still rumbling around, and it was shot by an F-4 aircraft firing a Havar rocket. This was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in my life. The combination of the airplane, the reverberation, the sound being channeled in the valley, and the rocket being fired on top of it. I had heard one sound as almost as loud. We were lying beside a railroad track in Vermont near my home, and when I was small, and a railroad and it was downhill there, and a train had come downhill about 6 miles downhill at about 60 miles an hour, and and I would tell you, the sound of a train is a lot, but this sound was louder in my view. And I learned then, be careful about sounds. The that that particular thing told us that people could misuse recon companies. Recon companies are not fighters. They are scouters, and they scout very well, but they're not at all well organized to fight in the sense of fighting a line battle. And so this we learned this once more, and our company commander moved us away from that as best he could. Quick challenge on the Chosin Reservoir. It was very cold. We had recorded temperatures of minus 30 degrees, and we were in sleeping bags and swap foxholes. And we had a company commander who was a crackerjack, and we had our officers took the 4 to 6 watch in the morning, the swing watch, and then we would work our way. As we were relieved, we'd work our way down the hill to get our orders for the day, and he'd always had hot coffee for us. We had to be careful we didn't burn our lips on the aluminum cups that we had. But we did. We were able to maintain ourselves there, and with the aircraft overhead all the time, and the constant fighting. Let's see if I can orient you on this a little bit better.
And Grandpa, I can, if we keep the map stationary, I can draw in kind of symbols to show people where you were.
You know, if you can see, you can see the port of Hung Nam and Ham Nung, and then directly north of it, Hagaru and Chosin Reservoir. That's almost right in the middle. It was the it was. This is not the exact map because this is an expansion of the earlier map. Yes, right where you show it with the red, and it was about 40 miles, but there was only 40 about that much, 40 miles air miles, maybe 60 air miles up into that Chosin Reservoir area, and the airplanes were overhead all the time. It was just amazing. And we had one of our guys said that when the airplanes flew over them, they put down their gear so they could go slow and they could really see the enemy and shoot guns at them. And he said he could read the there was writing on the tires. And writing on the tire. Anyway, it was a close fought fight, and we got out of there because we did have the airplanes. And it was that really that sent me finalized my ideas to go to aviation.
Dad, could I ask you, when you to get to Chosun, did you fought your way across Korea from Seoul?
No, we were on boats, and we had ships, and we waited actually offshore at Wonsan. We made circles in the ocean for days while they cleared the mines. The only resistance they had at sea were the mines that they put in the harbor at Wonsan and Hungnam. But they finally cleared them, and then they had the ocean way to get in there.
I'll jump in again. The other thing that was going on with all this, the Incheon landing was so successful, it kind of took everybody by surprise. And MacArthur said, "Well, we should finish this. This is the theater commander, General MacArthur, and we should go around again to the east side to Wonsan and continue on north all the way up to the Chinese border." And so the Marines were committed ashore, as Dad was saying, and then they were advancing up toward China, up toward where the Chosin Reservoir is shown. And at that point, the Chinese entered the war. Before then, we had just been fighting the North Koreans. But the Chinese came in surreptitiously and crossed the border. And because they were traveling mostly on foot, I think mostly even with sandals and everything in this bitter cold, but they outnumbered the Marines who had gotten to the chosen reservoir about 10-1. There were 10 times as many of them surrounding the Marines with Dad and at the chosen reservoir. So the Marines had to fight their way back out through the Chinese. And Dad was not actually up at the chosen reservoir. He was at, I guess, Hagaru or Coterie.
Coterie.
At Coterie. So they came back unit by unit. The ones that were farthest forward fought their way back down to those at Hagaru, and then they fought their way back down. And so then the whole division was coming out, and I just prompt you to tell one more story, and that's as they were coming out, they had to cross a bridge which was built across the face of a dam, basically, that was used for hydropower, and the Chinese had blown out the bridge, so they had to the Marines dropped in temporary bridging pieces to cross the gap, and then the whole division had to cross over this narrow little footpath practically thing of temporary bridges on the face of this cliff to come out. And they were all making their way out. And then once again, they took a recon company and they said, well, you guys will be the rear guard for everybody. So Dad was the rear guard with a company of tanks, of U.S. tanks, making their way to this bridge. And the last one's out. So back over to Dad.
That helps. Yeah, that gives you a feel for it. We were walking beside the tanks all night. We were the last unit to leave the bridge that was on above this, and walking down toward this bridge. And we were zombies, walking zombies. I've never experienced. We were so tired, and our legs just kept working, but we couldn't hear anything except from the tanks right beside us. And we weren't getting any benefit from the warmth of those tanks either. So it was a very cold night and very tired. And we walked down, I guess must have been 2 or 3 miles down to the bridge. When we got there, I found that the platoon behind me wasn't behind me. And so I tried to muster as many of my guys as I could, which we did. We got about 20 of them, but I couldn't find a company commander. And I was never as furious in my life. And I have to admit that I was probably crying, although nobody could see it because it was so dark. But we did start back up the mountain, and never was so pleased in my life, except when I saw Ernie Hargan and his platoon appear. It wasn't too many yards, maybe 400 or 500 yards. And when Ernie was alive, my whole life turned around right then, and we did lose a couple of guys, but nothing like we could have had we not been able to find them. So it was all around a very bad night. I would relate to you what happens psychologically. We got on our Jeeps and we were able to drive to the bottom. I remember nothing of the drive. When we got to the bottom, I remember that it got to be daylight, and I got out of the Jeep and was leaning up against the tire of the Jeep, on the side of the Jeep, and knowing that we wouldn't move without my waking up and knowing it. And that was what happened. They started, and I fell down and woke up, and we got in our Jeeps and then drove back out then all the way back down to the harbor and got back aboard ship. Boy, one other thing, we got aboard ship and we had as lousy a shipboard situation as you can imagine. We had bunks five deep, and we had cold water in the showers. And it was really miserable in that sense, but it was as close to heaven as I'm ever going to get when I got that first shower after 2 weeks in the open with no showers and no cleaning, no chance to get clean. Anyway, that ends the story. That was the first year in Korea.
How old were you, Dad?
I was 23 at the time,
Wow.
and Louise had just been born, so it was in 1950, and she and Muggs drove cross country with our little car and our dog to visit family during all this time.
How long were you at the reservoir, Dad?
Beg your pardon?
How long were you at the reservoir?
We we had been below it until the 28th of November, and we were back out by the 12th, I think, of December. So it was about a 2-week period. But 2 weeks without a shower is a lot of time.
We know that you don't like that, Dad. We learned that growing up. Everybody else's information. We couldn't camp unless there was a hot shower at the camping ground.
Another side story about all this. One of the complications for Dad and the rear guard, his platoon and the one platoon that was behind him, is that there were thousands of Korean refugees who decided that they didn't want to stay in North Korea, and they were crowding around the Marines all the way down. And then there were Chinese soldiers mixed in among them, taking shots now and then. But when they finally did get down to the port, I forget the name of the ship, but there was a one cargo ship that was there, and the skipper of the ship said, "Well, we're just not leaving any of these refugees behind." And you remember, maybe Pat can look up. There was some incredible number of Korean refugees that went aboard this ship that was designed to hold 32 crew members, and there were thousands of refugees on it. And one of the recent presidents of Korea was his mother was on that ship. Is how he was. This is one of the presidents of South Korea. I'll have to look all that up, but that's an interesting side story for you.
Yeah, he was
of that evacuation.
The evacuation. We evacuated roughly 100,000 U.S. troops. 3 divisions were evacuated by the Navy amphib forces, but they had almost that many refugees. And the story of the Korean president was that his mother had been pregnant with him when they came out of that. And so the first place that he visited when he came to the United States was the Korean War Memorial down at Quantico. Actually, the Chosin Reservoir Memorial at Quantico.
AI says it was the U.S. merchant ship Meredith Victory.
Yes.
And it transported over 14,000 North Korean refugees from
one run.
On one run. That's right. The largest humanitarian rescue operation by a single ship.
Yeah, it was overall in a sense, a miraculous recovery from a bad situation, and the to indicate why Marines are different. You know, everybody has reasons for their forces. It was the Air Force and Army that put the bridge in for us that got us out. So let's not let that be something parochial here. We're talking about Marines. But the thing that had come about by that time was the cooperation between the forces, not just the air and the ground and the Marines, but the air and the sea and the Navy air and the Marine air and Air Force air and Air Force dropping of the Army bridge and the Army forces. The Army was there when we got back to the South. The Army was there to relieve us. So I show this as one of the very first and one of the very best of the what they call joint campaigns. Later on, they had Goldwater Nichols make it into law, but that was years later when they finally figured that out.
Hey, Dad, would you comment on what some of the Marine sailors, etc., might have thought in their heads being like 23, 24 years old, and whether or not they had thoughts that they might not come back? Sort of the
Well-
humanistic side of it.
Well, there was a time when we all wrote letters. We really did. It really didn't look like there was really a way out when we had the Chinese all around us. But and while the 2nd and 3rd of December, there were some 200 sorties a day flown in front of the Marines coming back from the far distant point to the next point. From Udam to Hagaruri. So we had a lot of air and a lot of fighting going on at that time. But it was we realized that we were in pretty serious trouble. So we wrote letters home and said we sure liked you a lot, Mom, but we may not make it. And then we threw them away, of course, since we were able to throw them away. And we were never ever. I would tell you one other thing about individuals. The regimental commander of the 1st Marines had his headquarters about 200 yards down the slope from us. Regimental commander of the 1st Marines then was a guy named Chesty Puller. Over the years, he had 5 Navy Crosses, and it was, I must admit, that as long as he was there, and as long as he was ready to fight in any direction as he said he was, we were very confident that we were going to get out. Not sure, but very confident in our leadership, and it was true. They were very good leaders. The other leader was so good was General Smith, O.P. Smith, a Christian Scientist, by the way, but and he understood the nature of logistics, and all of these senior Marines had been in China, so they all knew the Chinese, which others in the Army did not. So we were a little bit better. We had our leadership was really superb, and we credit General Smith, but because he did do the logistic tasks that were necessary, and made sure they were done, that we finally were able to break through and get out. But it was a very close run thing, as the saying goes.
Hey, Uncle Phil, have you ever gone back to Korea?
Oh, many times, yes, Pat. Yes, the we went. I was deployed back to Korea in 1954 in the airplane. We got in the air wing and went back in '54, and they had begun to change, and the roads had begun to get better, and the airfields were better, and so on. We went back again as J3 in 1978. In this case, we were in civilian clothes on the walk when we were not on duty. And every time that we had anybody recognize us as having been there in 1950, they'd break into tears right in front of us on the road. It was my sense that I understood when Lafayette returned to the U.S. and it was exactly like that. That the gratitude is there, and it's still there. Well, I've been back many times since. Carol went back with me for our honeymoon, actually, and I had a speech to give, and had a chance to see. And it's a really powerful industrial country. Their economy is either the 9th or the 10th in the world at the moment.
One more question.
Sure.
Was that point at the Chosun Reservoir, was that when your North Star group came together or happened?
When your Chosun group came together, Dad.
The North Star pin you have? Are you familiar with that?
There's the Chosen Few, which is a veterans organization, has chosen a sort of a picture of a cross, which is really the night that the the stars came out, and we were always fearful of bad weather. But it was really a one night, and I'm sure it was one of the planets, but it was just as bright as could be above the town of Kotori where we were. It's called the Star of Kotori, and it's the symbol of the chosen few, and we wear it on our lapel sometimes. Does that answer the question, Pat?
That's it. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Mhm. Hey, Dad,
Yes.
I have some questions. First of all, I'm unfamiliar. The North Koreans, did they have any air or sea power that that they were interfacing with, or was it mostly ground forces for them?
I understood the question to be, did the North Koreans have air?
Air power or
No,
sea
that
power?
was one of the really nutty things to happen was the Russians let them go without they had a very primitive force, all land forces. No navy to speak of, no way to go to water, no way to go to the air, and it wasn't so unusual that they really got defeated. But it was only when General Craig had these 60 Corsairs that we were able to apply air power directly against them.
I see. Well, thank you.
There
And
were,
thank
there were
you for
no, they
sharing
had
that.
no airplanes. They had no anti-aircraft to speak of.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Hey, Dad, before the chat goes out of my view, Phil and Kelly have to leave, but they left you a note. Thank you so much for telling this story. Always nice to hear what you were doing back in the day. We love to see your perspective of things back then. And he said, thank you again so much.
Right, no, yeah, of course, you're quite welcome, Rita. It's you honor me very much to even invite me to do it, and I hope you recognize that this was the beginning of the so-called Cold War with the Soviet Union, and had it not been brought to at least to a stalemate, then we almost certainly would have seen Japan become communist. Had they been full blown on the peninsula, it's only not even 100 miles across the Straits of Tsushima, and there's islands in the way. And the Russians had already gone up into the Sakhalin Islands to the north of Japan, and still are there. So the possibilities of Japan falling to a communist political situation was very high, and this is why President
Truman. Truman.
President Truman, sorry, Harry Truman, instantly, almost within a day, had declared war and committed the U.S. troops. So it was a matter of a really a quick response, and really it was the first of the so-called battles of the Cold War, and we were fighting. We were competing with the communists everywhere, all over the world, actually, in Africa and in South America and Central America. And that Cold War continued for a long, long time until the communist system just collapsed. But it was certain that was going to happen.
But Dad, I have to say on a more personal level that if that 23-year-old lieutenant hadn't walked out of Chosin Reservoir, the lives of everyone on this call would have been a lot different if we actually had lives.
I was
Thank you for hanging in there. It's making your way out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there was no choice.
Earl has a question.
I didn't have a choice.
Regarding the Chosen Few organization. How many started in it and how many are still in it that were at the Chosin Reservoir?
I really don't know. We had maybe half of the Marines, maybe a quarter of the Army that had been there, and some of the Air Force and Navy. But there aren't that many left. we have our 75th reunion in October. We're going to the beach on the Columbus Day weekend, and it's the weekend before that, right, Louise?
You're the weekend after.
Yeah.
Right.
Beach is before and Chosun Few are after.
Okay.
They're Columbus Day weekend,
Okay.
whatever we call that weekend now.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was a kind of none of us were really prepared for most of those things. The Marines, the Marines that got in that first regiment were pulled from all over the world. They were never trained in the regiment in the Fifth Marines, but they were all, many of them are the leaders. The officers had seen combat in World War II, and the NCOs in particular had seen combat, and it really makes a huge difference if you've got one guy at least that's had been shot at and missed. And we had one, only Steve Matichak, but he was a big help. And one of the things that I didn't mention in particular, but to get ready, we had a buddy system. We knew we were we were our own worst enemies ashore. We had a buddy system, and it said you will never ever get out of sight of this person while you're ashore. Never ever. They're just a link, and they did. And we also had a rule that said we never ever put a round in the chamber of the weapon. Now when you're in that situation, you're also scared you can hardly walk, and anything that happens, and anything, a disturbance or somebody falls down in front of you or something, the first thing you're going to do is shoot at them. And then I don't know that we ever had that happen because we did not permit a round in the chamber at any time. And as far as I know, all through that whole operation of six landings ashore, we never put a round in the chamber except the one that I did. Maybe others did during that shooting time, but that one that I did to try to get us off the beach. So it's it really says, you're here to obey orders, and the orders are to get people on and off the beach safely, not to fight the enemy, and we did. And that was and so it becomes important to understand what the orders mean and why we should follow them.
I have a
So,
question, Grandpa. So the first part of the story, when you let's see, you were pulling guys out of the water, how many people are we talking were in the water?
There was something I've lost track of that. I knew it exactly for a long time, but the exact number has disappeared. But it's approximately a dozen, and I'm not sure what the proportion between Marines and sailors, but it was about even. So that's about all I can remember at this time. But it was I remember at the night that as each one came aboard, the elation that we'd found one, and it kept coming, and so we finally found them all, and the idea that we had really prepared as good as we could, teaching them how to survive if they weren't a very good swimmer, teaching the buddy system that people would not leave one another, and our preparation for it really worked well.
Must have just been exhausting. I'm sure you all on adrenaline, of course, but once it caught up, I'm assuming just overwhelming exhaustion from that, trying to pull people out of water in the dead of night.
I'm sorry, who's talking?
No.
Pat? Yeah. I don't remember. I'm sure what happened is that we were on the ship, and the ship went back to Yokosuka, and I'm sure we just slept 24 hours, and no matter what the conditions were, how bad our quarters were, we just slept and enjoyed it, and it finally recovered. I don't have any remembrance of any recovery time or anything like that.
No beer parties, Dad? They didn't throw
Well,
you.
we were still aboard ship. We
No,
were,
they didn't do that.
Mhm.
we left the west side of Korea. When was it, the last of those raids, and went by ship back to Yokosuka, and we got off the ship and got a transport ship that took us down to the south of Japan, and we joined the division. So we didn't have any time or any beer parties or anything else like that to do that. Fortunately, I would have been out fish out of water in that sort of environment.
So
You go
how
back-
did you get
you
into
go
the
back to
air?
Korea after the Chosen?
Oh, two of us.
Did you go back to Korea after you were done at the Chosen Reservoir?
Yes, they did.
Yes, we got out and we were and as we left the Chosen, we came back to the south. We got landed back at Busan and made a camp in Mason and spent Christmas of 1950 in Mason in a tidy little camp. But immediately started patrolling that far south. We were patrolling miles up into Korea. And I remember the 1st or 2nd of January, we had a very long patrol that lasted all day. And when we got back, I had my orders. The 3rd of January said my orders back to flight training. I almost turned them down because we were in combat. But I realized, and people said to me at the time, he says, well, this is your last chance to go flying. And I wanted to fly since I was 5 years old. So that was it became, but it was a big question for quite a while.
Dad, I've got to go and pick up Charlotte at the airport. She's coming back from Mexico, but thank you for doing this. It was really great to hear the story again.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for, it seems like such a cliche, but it really is true for you. Thank you for your service. So is that all right? We'll end this call now. And obviously, Grandpa, I know he would love to talk with you if you have
Yep.
any.
Yep. Thanks
any
a
other
lot
questions.
I'm really honored that you all came on to listen.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. It's
Thank you, Dad.
Thank
so
you. It was
amazing.
great,
Thank
Dad.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah.
Really wonderful.
Thank you.
Adios.
And please do
Good to
share the
see you,
recording.
Cuties.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
I will.
Bob Walser.
Okay. Thank
Love
you all.
you guys.
Bye.
Chase your dreams.